Okay, guys, welcome to episode 2 of the Dan Hooker podcast. Very special guest today, David Eagle. He's in the house. Thank you very much. I give you a round of applause.
Hi, guys.
I'll just annoy everyone by clapping. So usually we start out and we'll review the past UFC event from this weekend, but I didn't watch it.
I watched a little bit.
So it's not going to be that interesting of a conversation. I was down in New Plymouth at a fight show. So I drove. If you don't know, if you're not from New Zealand, it's a 5-hour drive from Auckland, where I live, down to New Plymouth. So we shot down there. I had one of my fighters on a card down there. Wade Pickard put on the card. Awesome event. There was no crowd for the event. It was just the fighters, just the teams. So credit to Wade for putting on the show. He at a loss, just to get the boys back in there, get them moving, get them active, and get them back in action. Great main event. Tyler Headley took out a New Zealand title by unanimous decision on the weekend, and there's some huge talent in New Zealand. Just being in there, watching the fights, there's just so many athletic up and comers. Man, the future is very bright for New Zealand combat sports. There's a UFC event coming up this weekend.
Right.
Now, if you are unaware, peoples out there, this is a very good card that I have my eyes on. Colby Covington versus Tyron Woodley.
Perfect time to have it.
Why do you say that?
Just with the current political situation they have over there with all the riots and everything like that, I think people need to let off steam and have one from one side, one from the other side, just battle it out in the cage. I think that's going to be healthier for...
This is how we should all settle our political...
Absolutely. I think the election should be Trump versus Biden in the cage. Whoever wins is now the new president. 100%.
Send forth a nominee.
Pay-per-views and that would be...
No, that's actually a cracking card. So we got Colby versus Woodley. How I see that playing out, I just feel like the holes in Woodley's game have been exploited. I think. Yeah. Unless he can show a new string in his bow, it's going to be a pretty. It's going to play out how his last 2 fights played out. You could see Usman worked him out. Gilbert Burns kind of just followed the same plan, just feinting him back into the cage, drawing out his right hand, smothering him against the cage and working him. Colby Covington definitely has the skill set to get it done. I just feel like Colby Covington the game plan is set on how to beat Woodley. Like the game plan is there. And if he follows what the last 2 guys do, it's going to be pretty obvious. So I think Colby Covington takes the win, even though I hate his persona. I hate the way he markets himself. I hate the way he gets himself on the map. I feel like he's doing the sport a huge injustice. But
at the same time, making money.
He can fight. The kid can fight, and I feel like he gets the job done against Woodley. Also on that card, Donald Cerrone's fighting Nico Price. Wow. That's a heck of a fight.
That is an amazing
Good to see Cowboy coming back at welterweight. Nico Price, man, he's got... awkward timing, very hard to time an awkward guy like that, and he tends to get hurt a lot, come back and knock people out.
He does. I remember this fight against that guy where he knocked him out with hammer fists from bottom of guard.
He knocked out. He knocked out him, and he knocked out James Vick with an up kick.
Right, yeah, that's right.
He was on his back, got taken down, knocked out with an up kick.
Out of nowhere.
Gonna be a cracking fight. That one. Khamzat Chimaev, the new hype train.
Yes.
Fighting
the new meme generator?
Gerald Mersholt. Gerald's tough, man. He's a game guy. The most disrespectful thing you could possibly do is book a guy for a fight and then book him immediately after with Damian Maia. I was like, I would be fuming, man, if someone did that to me. If they booked me, I'd be tearing my hair out, man.
That's
if
horrible.
they booked to fight me and
just
then
assume the victory.
book my opponent to fight someone else, I would want to rip his head off. Yeah. Johnny Walker's back, Ryan Spann. He's working with Johnny Walker's at Coach Kavanagh.
Oh, wow.
He's at Straight Blast Gym. Oh. Yeah. He's been working with Coach Kavanagh over there in Ireland. So he's getting around because he moved to...
Thailand?
He went through Thailand with his Brazilian team. Then he went to TriStar and he was training with Faraz. And now I just saw him working with Kavanagh. So that's a interesting chop and change and jump around.
There's a lot of gyms, a lot of good gyms, but
We'll see the developments. Mackenzie Dern, Random Marcos, Kevin Holler, Darren Stewart. That's a banger. Masad Bektik's back in there. So as of late, I think this is one of the most stacked cards that's lately
happened. A lot of exciting fights.
But Colby Covington, I'm backing him. That
So-
hurt. That hurt me to see in my heart when I just said that.
Yep.
So anyway, that we've knocked that out of the park. I knocked that out of the park. The UFC, I didn't watch, and then the upcoming UFC. I'm interested. I'm going to watch that one. 100%. I'm going to watch that one. If you come back, we're going to review that card. We're going to get into why you're here, my friend, because you are a very knowledgeable man in an aspect of the sport where I am not knowledgeable, and that's the youth development side of things. And that's because we've come from like completely different backgrounds. So you've come from like a traditional martial arts background. What age did you start?
I started at 11 years old, started Taekwondo, and I did both styles, the Olympic and non-Olympic styles of Taekwondo, and then also did a little bit of karate and got black belts in all three of those styles.
Yeah, see, I picked it up at 18, week 19 made my professional debut. So my whole exposure to the sport has been like an incredibly professional side of things. Trained for 4 years, got in the UFC. Mine's like we've just had completely backgrounds,
That's right.
and that's.
I would say your background is quite hard to repeat. So to get another kid coming through and just go, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're just going to chuck you in the ring and good luck to you. Right.
Just chuck 100 kids into like a professional system and be like.
I think in 1,000, you chuck 1,000 kids into that situation, one of them might make it to pro.
I'm smart enough to know that it's not the right way to go about things.
That's the thing for me is I think you're 1 in a million to be able to make it to UFC, to put yourself into a UFC title contendership position after all these years. It's a incredible journey, like a nearly impossible journey that takes a 1 in a million kind of person to reach that kind of position. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people do that method and they don't even come close to making it.
Yeah, well, that's it. If you look at any professional sport has a youth development program.
Yep.
So
the All Blacks.
the All Blacks have a youth development program. But anything, rugby, soccer, hockey, netball, everything has a youth development program. So it has to be taken seriously.
Yes.
And it's something that me, because of my background and where I've come from, I've had no exposure to the youth development program. So then I've brought you into my gym to teach the teens, to teach the kids, because you're someone that's a lot more knowledgeable about how to do it, because I've never been through that program. I've never been exposed to it. So right now we have the IMAF.
There's Gamma. There's also various different kickboxing world championships and amateur that you can do all around the world. In the European circuits, there's a lot of different organisations, including Waco, the organisation I belong to, which have pinnacle events for amateurs. So they can get all their experience, all their time. They can do some kids in Russia, some kids throughout different parts of Eastern Europe and even Western Europe have 100 like competitions, combat competitions under their belt before they even step in the ring for the first time, because they started when they were 5-6 years old, and they worked themselves up through the ranks.
That's one of the biggest questions I get asked is at what age is a good age to get into combat sports? Because like I know. Well, I have a daughter, so I've studied what age I need to throw her into tennis to make me $1 million. And as you don't specialize kids into sport until they're like 14 years old. Like you don't pick a sport. It's good to just have them play like a bit of everything. So they're playing jumping sports, they're playing running sports, they're playing.
Don't specialize too early. That's the first step.
Yeah.
The beauty of combat sports is as well as there's so many of them. There's so many different combat sports you can compete in. There are different striking combat sports. There are different grappling combat sports. There's different ones that kind of mix them up, and they're all designed for safety purposes to keep the kids safe.
Yeah, that's another question I had. Is how do you keep it safe? How are you avoiding like head contact. Let's say like a 10-year-old.
We take like rugby as an example. Then you start off with touch rugby. You know what I mean? You start off with kids learning to run around the ring. They used to start off with one-hand touch, then you go to two-hand touch, and then you start working on tackling, but you restrict the kinds of tackles that you're allowed to do until you eventually get more and more professional, and the rules and regulations start to reduce.
Yeah.
You look at MMA, it's the style with the least amount of regulations. Makes it the most dangerous. Actually, I think it's not necessarily the most dangerous because you can submit people and they stop the fights a lot quicker now than they used to. If you can't fight back, they just stop it. Whereas in boxing, for instance, you have 3 knockdowns. You can be knocked out cold like Tyson Fury was in his first Deontay Wilder fight, and then you can wake up 9 seconds later and continue and finish the fight. That can't happen in MMA. So that's why I think MMA is slightly more safe.
Another question I had was how important do you think it is to have MMA included as an Olympic sport?
I think it's the most unimportant thing ever.
Unimportant.
Personally, I come from a Taekwondo background where Taekwondo is the Olympic sport. I started in the 90s when it wasn't a big Olympic sport and people fought for real and with pads on, but you can only kick above the waist. But people fought I remember having serious, when I was 14 years old, having some incredible brawls of aggression, and we were in tears and crying and brutally beaten at the end of it, blood coming out of our nose and everything like that. That was Taekwondo when I started. The rules have changed to be more spectator friendly and more safe because of the Olympic values.
Yeah.
So when you start implanting the Olympic values into a combat sport, it starts to reduce the amount of it increases its safety, but it also changes the sport in terms of what wins a fight. When we get to it's important to have an amateur circuit so people get ring time and experience, but if having a pinnacle event to that level is going to change the sport to something none of us recognize. That's the only risk you have.
Yeah, that's what I was taking. That's why I bring it up, because the goal of these amateur organizations, IMF, you've fought on IMF. Their ultimate goal is to get an Olympic sport.
Because the Olympics is a great pinnacle event that gives you large amounts of exposure.
But
it's going to increase popularity.
But does it water the sport down?
Massively. That's the only setback to doing that. Now, the thing is, combat sports wants more exposure, so our gyms and everything, it's basically free advertising for gyms and clubs and everything, to have us go to a pinnacle event like the Olympics. We already have a pinnacle event, though, that's just as big as the Olympics. It's the UFC, it's Bellator, it's ONE FC. We have events that drive interests and gives kids a dream. One day I might want to reach this pinnacle event. One day I might want to reach the top level. Taekwondo isn't a professional martial art. It's beneficial for Taekwondo to be in the Olympics because there's no other pinnacle event that you can make a large amount of money in. So it requires the exposure. The benefit to Taekwondo being in the Olympics is it went from, I think, a few million people practicing it to over 100 million people practicing it around the world.
So then the object of amateur MMA should be to prepare someone for professional MMA.
I agree.
But the way that it's kind of going is amateur MMA is watering down the sport to make it acceptable as to qualify as an Olympic sport.
One thing, as I say, is that MMA can be practiced by anyone. It's healthy for anyone to practice, to learn. The skills that you develop are transferable to any part of your life. Your mind changes when you do martial arts. When you realize the actual risk of fighting by practicing real fighting techniques, you don't want to get into a real fight. The people who are the most peaceful people that I've met are people who are professional fighters. Yeah. Because they've first of all, they want to get paid to fight first. So sign on the dotted line if you want to fight me. That's the general attitude of a professional fighter. Secondly, they know the injuries. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not going to take those injuries if you're not going to give me a good, pay packet for it.
Preach,
absolutely. So you'll find that the most peaceful people you meet are professional fighters. They have no interest in fighting outside of the ring or outside of the cage.
Now, something else I wanted to ask you was, because you've been to the IMF World Championships.
I have. Yes.
So the pinnacle of what amateur MMA is going to the IMF World Champions. Now, I don't have a great understanding, so I wanted to understand how the pulse is. So I have a fighter. Mm-hmm. I have an amateur MMA fighter. I want to send them to the world champs. I need to fundraise to raise the money. let's get past that. That's not my gripe. I get them to the world champs. Now, does my fighter go into a pool of just every weight and just get randomly paired up with someone?
There's a kind of a seeding system based on previous performances in IMF events. So,
if you're lower seed, you get ranked off someone higher seed.
Exactly.
The higher
like tennis,
seed,
like tennis, exactly. So the top guy should, in
so
theory,
I
have
put my kid. Let's say my kid's had 5 fights, amateur, and I send him to the world champs.
Yep.
He could get matched up with a guy with 100 kickboxing fights and 30 MMA fights.
Yeah, well,
now I would, if you approach me with that fight, if you're a promoter, I put my boy forward, and then he came back and he was like, "Oh, I've got this guy. He's had 100 kickboxing fights and 30 fights." I'll be like, "That doesn't make sense.
Yep.
I don't want to match that fight." So why would I send an amateur fighter to get thrown to the wolves to make someone else win a world title? It doesn't make sense to me.
One thing I'll say in defense of IMF and any other amateur circuit that runs events like that, for instance, like Gamma and there's Waco, there's WKA, IFMA, ISCA, all those different events that run events like this where you have multiple fights throughout the day and you seed it to have the best person fight the worst person, is there safer forms of the sport. IMF is a safer form of the sport in the sense that the referees stop the fight a lot earlier in amateur than they would in
another rule. There's no stand-ups, right?
Well, it depends on if you're fighting cadet. There's no head contact. If you keep going up, they start increasing the amount of rules. As I explained, the same way we do in getting people into rugby. They incrementally add or remove rules, but to allow you.
Then I'm kind of thinking that IMF, unless I had a kid that I thought could win it.
Well, the thing is also it doesn't end up on your record. The experience.
It's on your amateur record.
I suppose. But
your amateur record, if you scroll past your professional record, your amateur record shows up. Like you'd have to think that's.
How many people pay attention to amateur records when you're famous? You know, if you're undefeated.
My record. Well, speaking of my professional record's dog shit, so I don't really mind that much.
Well, the thing is, like, from experience of competing and competing in a lot of amateur events like this with Taekwondo, different karate events I've been to with lots of fights happening, and
How many times do you fight though? You
can fight like with Taekwondo, you can fight 7 fights in one day.
With the IMAF, with the
IMAF,
MMA?
you fight once a day
for how many days?
Over a week.
You can
every
fight
day you got to
five
fight
times, or you can
fight 5 times. You have to win 6 fights to be champion.
6 fights in 6 days.
If you don't win, you show up to the day and you watch so many top level fighters from around different countries compete against each other. If you're as an amateur watching that, you absorb it too. So you see the fights happen, and you kind of like pick up through osmosis what the rest of the world's doing. Yeah. Every different country has a different style of doing MMA. Because we all have different kind of backgrounds or different combat sports that were big. For instance, Russia has a large sambo background. Yeah. America has a large wrestling background. We have not large, but we have a highly skilled kickboxing background. So the people coming out of New Zealand are largely strikers that have learnt jiu-jitsu. In Brazil, they're largely Brazilian jiu-jitsu competitors who are learning striking. America, wrestlers who are learning to strike. Russian sambo guys learning not to headbutt when they fight. Like those kinds of... You're getting people from different styles competing against each other. Like the Kazakhstanis, I noticed, they like to box a lot and then wrestle you to the ground and hold you down.
Yeah.
And you get to see how these different styles match up against each other. And even if you're not fully paying attention consciously, unconsciously you're seeing the different styles work together against each other. And I think as a person who wants to watch their fighter develop, going to an event like IMAF or Gamma or Waco where you get all these events, or WKA or anything, where you get all these fights happening and all these different people from around the world competing against each other, you get to see different countries fight different countries all the time, and you learn through osmosis so much in that experience, even if you don't necessarily win the title. And maybe you're ambitious enough one day to keep going and spending all that money to go overseas and compete for an amateur title, or you go, hey, I just want to make money, and you just go straight pro. But you've got great experience that backs you up, that fortifies your fighting style going into actually getting your head knocked out, or taking that risk to do that.
Yeah, I'm definitely not against amateur MMA.
Yeah, absolutely.
I feel like it's a necessity, right? You're gonna need, like I was saying before, every professional sports has a youth development program. Every professional sport has an amateur league.
Absolutely.
So you would need them. And also, everyone I respect has been won over to the amateurs and won over to IMATH. And that's why I just wanted to have you on, have the discussion.
Yeah.
Convince me, Dave.
I will. I don't know if I will. I'm not trying to sell amateur events to people who just want to go straight pro. If you want to go straight pro, and good luck to you. And I wish you all the best. Be safe about your approach.
Yeah, it's hard.
Is my absolutely. Try to take on. I would say try to take on the approach of hit without being hit. That's the one thing I'll say. For the future durations, try not to develop to train yourself to have an iron chin.
That's my first coaching advice.
Yeah.
My best coaching advice is do as I say, not as I do. I do things oh man, everyone's I was watching sparring, everyone's blasting each other in the shin, kicking each other in the shin. And I'm like, why are you doing that? They're like, you kicked Dustin in the shin loads. And I was like, it was stupid. Don't do it.
It was a great spectacle though.
I gave it a go. I was trying to get the back of his calf.
Yeah.
It didn't quite work out the way I wanted to work it out.
Yeah, exactly. I think the time we live in now in New Zealand in regards to combat sports, there's a big contrast where we live, I think, in the darkest time in terms of running an MMA gym, and also the most exciting time in terms of running an MMA gym. In terms of the government restrictions right now, a lot of gyms right now, we feel for you, it's like a slow death. When are we going to open back up? When are we going to be allowed to run a business the way we want to run a business? Yeah. At the same time, internationally, we've got people like you, Israel, Kai, Shane, Ev Ting, new up-and-coming guys coming through the different Kieran Joblin, John Bruin, Ina Manasi, Byron Shivers, all these guys coming through and potentially are going to bring more attention to combat sports, not just MMA, but to combat sports in general, just with their backgrounds and everything like that. So MMA gyms are not MMA gyms only. I'm not speaking just for them. I mean, martial arts gyms across the country need to be prepared for a boom that's coming once the restrictions open, because of the kind of the platform you guys have created and the exposure you guys have created are going to create I know from. Why do we love rugby so much? Because we're the best at it. Yeah. All of a sudden, we're now the best at fighting, just out of nowhere, right? So all these kids, they're going to go, well, what can I do? And they look around people in their country and go, well, we're the best at rugby, so I'm going to put all my heart and soul into rugby. Now the new generation of kids are coming through, and I would argue have more idols now in combat sports and mixed martial arts, and they're going to be going, that's my future. That's what I want to do. However, we have a massive lack of infrastructure right now to cater for that. We don't have, as you were saying, enough competitions to suit the younger generations, to suit the kids coming through who want to start at 5, 6, 7, 8. We don't have enough coaches really to, as you were talking in the car before about, traditionally we see mixed martial arts as a small pool, and everyone's kind of fighting within that small pool. All of a sudden, there's this opportunity that's come where the pool's going to get so much bigger.
Grow the industry.
Absolutely, to grow the industry. And this is the other thing is that people, like gyms, people who run their businesses, they look at other businesses as a threat. However, it's a weird thing in mixed martial arts that in order for you to grow and have good competition, your neighbor needs to also grow and have good competition. Otherwise, you run out of opponents. Who are you going to fight if you're the only gym that's good?
I agree.
You've got to, and this is the thing is, if you want more, people complain about there not being enough opponents for them at pro level. The biggest problem with that is there's not enough good coaches, that are building them. I mean, there are a lot of good coaches, but not enough to have a regular circuit within locally that allow us to constantly compete without having to pay $4, $5, $6 to go to Asia or Europe to get any real exposure to.
Well, I think we're coming to that realization now that we don't need to go in New Zealand. A youngster, a guy that wants to fight professionally, he doesn't need to leave New Zealand.
Absolutely,
there's enough coaches in New Zealand to grow and be the worst if we work together.
Yep, there are a lot of amazing coaches in the country. Absolutely, where you're going to fight, what competitions the kids going to fight in, the teenagers going to fight in that are safe for the teenagers. That the parents watch and go, oh, I feel safe enough to put them in that competition. Right now, no parent's going to let their child, not no parent, but the minority of parents, tiniest minority of parents are going to let their kids fight in the ring. I mean, hardly any. But things like mat sports, semi-contact events that have a lot more rules, that are safer, where kids can develop their skills without getting too badly hurt, but also compete more than once that day. Parents are going to be bought into that a lot more than going to fight to get their kids' face kneed in under Muay Thai rules or something like that.
Yeah.
Or, or fighting paddlers fights or things like that. Like there's progressions. That when a country has a boom and a lot more fighters coming in because a lot more kids are inspired, we need that infrastructure in place. We need more competitions. And I mean, part of my role in what I'm doing right now is to build that. But I don't see my role as the only role that should be doing it. I think more people are doing it, like me. And we need just more of that as the boom coming in from what you guys have done. To cater for it, because like with
what can we do though? Like how can we help build infrastructure for teenagers and for kids?
I think it's a matter of within the gyms kind of educating themselves on safer rule sets for kids. But first of all, being open-minded to it, just being open-minded. There's actually a great benefit to your business, training kids, not just training kids as a daycare service, but training kids to compete. Like a lot of gyms are running their kids classes, and they have in-houses. They don't feel safe to run to send their kids into other gyms where those kids could get badly hurt and then they leave. To educate yourself on what's out there in terms of safe combat sports that your kids can compete in, because what that does is it motivates kids. Because kids what we're competing with is Saturday sports. Like every kid's got some kind of Saturday sport, like soccer or football or cricket or rugby. I just said that three times, I think.
There's a lot of rugby.
There's a lot of rugby in New Zealand. Absolutely. And so there's a lot of sports that exist, and it would be amazing. I mean, this is like a massive goal if we could have combat sports that are safe that you could run every weekend. It's like a Saturday sport for kids. That would be the best infrastructure for the boom that we're going to go through. You would see, we would be the next Dagestan easily. Like where kids are just coming out of the womb fighting, you know what I mean?
Well, I 100% agree with you. For New Zealand's doing so well now with guys like we got 4 on this pay-per-view card in 2 weeks. Israel, Kai, Brad, Shane, they're all over there. Yes. But to continue the success, not only in the professional, we need to do what you say. We need to build the teens, we need to build the kids, and we need to start laying the infrastructure. So there's like a direct way.
As I said, like I don't think in Israel Adesanya or a Shane Young or a Kai Kara-France or a Dan Hooker is repeatable realistically. Like we're lucky that we've had amazing athletes just through pure force of will and determination and having a great team and a great bunch of mentors around them make it to the top, make it to the UFC. We're so lucky as martial artists throughout the country, because it doesn't just benefit MMA, it benefits all combat sports.
Well, that's it. I wanted to repeat. I want the next generation to have the same success. I want the generation after that in New Zealand. I want New Zealand to be at the top of martial arts for a very long time. I don't want 100%. This to be, a repeat and then a repeat of what we had before with Ray Seffel and Mark Khan and Doug Viney doing so well in the K1.
And it became an era, right? It became an era, and then it died off.
I want it to continue.
Exactly. And it makes all the sacrifice that those guys have made in the past worth it. That's the thing for me, is that passing on to the new generation is one of the biggest things you can do as an athlete, because it makes everything you've done worth it, because you can't take these experiences with you. One of the things that I love about martial arts in general is the memories of standing up on podiums with medals around my neck and going and traveling around the country with friends, and then eventually around the world. Well, that's it.
Like, it is a team sport. Yeah. At the end of the day, you're interacting with the other kids.
And as a person who also directs tournaments and run tournaments, the best feeling I get is watching that happen for the future generation, seeing kids get post on Instagram the medals that they won and how excited they were and how fun it was that they went to these events, and those memories last them a lifetime. Even if they don't continue, as I said, even under a situation where we have the perfect national sport, MMA, or just combat sports in general, become our national sport, still a few people are going to make it to the UFC still.
Yeah.
But we're going to have far more support for those people. We're going to have far more spectators wanting to be involved.
Well, if you have knowledge and understanding of something, you're like...
Far more support for the businesses that are running, far more support for the coaches that are coming through, far more support for the referees, and people are getting paid more and able to take it more seriously, as they're not doing it. They're not trying to run a gym and have a full-time job at the side. They're actually able to look at it as a legitimate career opportunity. Even though still, we're only going to have a few people make it to that top pinnacle event, because it's just the nature of when competition pools are so huge. Like when only one person can win every single time.
Yeah.
And during that period, a lot of people are going to be losing and they're going to fall out. But it doesn't mean those people didn't gain any value from those experiences. Martial arts has so many different transferable skills that you gain from it, especially knowing what it's like to be in a fight. Changes your mentality about life completely, makes you more compassionate, makes you more caring, makes you more like, it does actually, it makes you care about people a lot more, strangely, than just being someone who's got a lot of aggression and anger and frustration, like, because we live in a...
That's me. No.
Right. But just a lot of people now with social media, right? They're reading social media, they're scrolling through, and they're getting frustrated at the world. And one of the best things you can do is just jump into a MMA gym, or not just any kind of combat sports gym, and hit some pads. Maybe hit a person who's consenting to it, and both of you will become closer because of it. Both of you will be best friends. Like, some of your best friends you have in your life are people you've smacked in the face. Same with me. My best friends, long time friends, are people who've kicked me in the face, who've knocked me out, done all sorts of, they choked me out, put me to sleep. They're my best mates. They're the closest, the closest people that I have to me. They're like brothers, they're family to me now, and that's the kind of bonds you can create in martial arts. And the memories, if we have a good competition circuit around the country, the memories last a lifetime, and they're your favorite ones looking back on your childhood.
Thank you, Dave. I feel smarter from this conversation. No, it's good to just have you on, someone speaking from a completely different background to me, and educate me on a side of the sport which I have no knowledge of. Get your kids
into it.
Bring your kids to the gym,
please.
My man. Yep. My final segment of the show. I didn't get to the Twitter questions, generally,
I got one Twitter question for you.
Hit me.
Tony Ferguson. How's that going?
That's in here. That's in the questions. Tony Ferguson. I mean, I would. Let's be honest. I would.
Dustin, who's just too good for it now. Right?
I would.
Beats you in like the last second, basically. Now he's too good for Tony.
I swear he did the same thing last time, where he went back to Louisiana. I swear there's I think he just goes home for a holiday. I'm not too sure if their fight's fallen through. The UFC haven't called me about it, haven't contacted me about it, so that's
that is a great fight.
They should, I would.
Yeah, that is a great fight, Tony, if you want it. It's here for you.
What is your username? He says, run up to fight day in terms of food. What do you eat leading up? What helps with training and recovery? So you want me to... I'm not going to answer that.
Say it again?
My entire diet. I can't run through I just eat normal food. And then when I lose weight, I just eat less food. I put less food in my mouth.
It's a good time to advertise, though, for your sponsors.
My man, the fight dietitian.
There we go.
Get down.
Get down there, guys.
Yeah. I was like, I listened to the fight dietitian.
Yep.
Your pug dealer, petition for the podcast to be renamed Hooked. You only have one like.
How many people have signed that
there's
petition?
Only one. Yeah. There's only one like on that. You fighting Ferguson?
If it's going to be Hooked, it should be the picture of you knocking out Vic in the civil. It's like...
MMA gone wild. When you go to Bunnings, do you get onions on your snag or just raw dog tea sauce and muzza on that bad boy? I just go, no onions. No onions is the answer for that one. Combat memes. This will never happen, but a Bellator UFC co-promotion has been brought up in the past. Champ versus champ. Does the UFC win by a landslide? I think so.
Absolutely.
I think it's closer than people think it is, but it would never happen because, we all know that the UFC has a essentially like a monopoly on the market at this stage. So to bring in and give like another promotion that opportunity or credibility, I don't see it happening. Hendo 2, you mentioned fighting smarter. What does that look like for you as a fighter? I don't know. Lots of success with your power and KO ability. What does fighting smarter entail? You're a legend. Being more defensively sound, being more positionally aware.
I think that's a big
getting
thing.
Hit less.
You can be a smaller
That's like
fighter.
an easy answer.
You can be a smaller fighter, and if you've got superior position, you can beat most people.
This guy's asked 4 questions. That's too many questions, friend. Ooh, Mr. Dude Dangle. Would you consider going back down to 145 at some point of your career? Fuck no.
It's quite a question. How much money would you need to go to 145?
Start throwing some dollars at me.
So we'll start with 1 million. Not enough?
Million's not bad.
145?
Go on a bit of a diet.
Fight dietitian, everyone.
Ooh, Lazamelia, what is your city kickboxing shin conditioning routine? I think you just kick the heavy bag really hard.
Some yes, there's some interesting ones that people do, isn't there? They get like a mallet and they whack themselves in the shin.
Not much. Just kick like a really hard bag.
One thing that does do, my sports science background I learned, is it creates microfractures, and then when your leg breaks, it can't heal. So if you do that method, it can seriously cause very serious injuries.
You're going like backwards, not forwards.
Absolutely. I think sometimes just be hard. Don't condition it and just accept the pain. You know, like it's a fight, right? You know.
Another Tony Dustin. There's plenty of Tony Dustins. Yes, I would take the fight. Yes. Simple answer, yes.
I mean, they're all running from you, really. Tony,
Matopofurus. You didn't answer this last time. Dan Hangman. Smelliest opponent? Question mark. Jason Knight's breath.
Oh, wow.
When he was like, got on my face. I was talking shit to him, so it's like, fair enough. I got on my face and I was like...
Legit weapon.
Oh. Jason Knight's breath is the answer. There, I answered your question. I can't even pronounce some of this stuff. Darius Dionysius. Would you beat Jake the Muss in a fantasy matchup? He's got a mean left. Oof. I know for a fact Jake the Muss doesn't know any jiu-jitsu. I would take Jake the Muss down. Twitter questions done. That's a wrap. Episode's 2 finished. My very first guest, David Eagle.
To be the first guest.
Thank you very much for making Dan Hooker smarter than he was before this podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Wrap.